Hello, Paula Sheil here from Tuleburg Press and The Right Place. The Right Place is Tuleburg's Book Art Center in downtown Stockton, where we do letterpress printing, paper making, and bookbinding. But this last summer, we worked with community medical centers and a wide variety of participants from the community to make paper. And we want to show you what a great adventure that was. I'm going to do a screen share here and show you pieces to piece. First off, I want to congratulate Jessica Fong for this fabulous logo, because while you may be intrigued by this shape, it's actually the shape of a rag pulper, a machine that in our case is called an oracle beater. And I'll show you pictures of this as we go along, but it's a very interesting machine. So this project called Pieces to Piece is about rag pulping a garment and turning it into paper. We did this under the auspices of The Right Place in conjunction with community medical centers and the Center at Sierra Health Foundation. And because we were under COVID restrictions, we did it at Hatch Workshop on Union Street, because we could go outside and stay social distanced. But I'm going to back up a whole year. Drew Matat is a paper maker born in the United States, but living currently in Germany, where he operates a full floor of a paper making and artist studio. He does paper making, but he's got visual artists, graphic artists, painters, etc., all on his floor in Germany, all operating their own studios. But Drew was part of our veterans writing project last summer. So he showed up from Germany, and I never met a more enthusiastic person, who basically helped us get started, and in 3 days had us trained of how to use this valley beater and how to accomplish this task of turning military garments into paper. So this beater here that you see on the right is at the University of Pacific in the art department, and it's called a valley beater. It's just a different model, but you'll see what we did is that we worked with military garments. These happen to actually be camouflage pants donated to me from my son, Donovan, who served in the Navy. So he gave me some garments to start with. The idea is to take the garment and cut it up into pieces, put it in this rag pulper, and make paper, and turn them into something outside of the body, a poem, a story, an essay, a drawing, a painting. So what Drew is doing here in these slides is actually we're running some pulp through the beater, and we added some carborundum to it, which is a grit like what you find on an emery board, and that actually sharpens the blade. So what we're doing is prepping here, and this is Jessica Fong on the right, and she is a studio manager here at The Right Place in conjunction with Caitlin Castaneda, but she also is the gallery operator or gallery director and CEO at the Elsie Mae Goodwin Gallery that's operated by the Stockton Art League on the Miracle Mile. Jessica's also a paper maker. What Drew is doing on the left is applying a piece of paper we made to a window, because he showed me you can create a flatter surface by putting the paper on the window. So we're just doing a variety of things that he's training us how to do. Here's Caitlin Castaneda, and she's cutting up some coffee bags. We use that burlap as a carrier, because when you cut up some material like cotton or rayon or any of the blended fabrics that are used in clothing, sometimes it helps to have another kind of fiber that's more natural, pulling those fibers through the machine. So burlap works well, abaca, which is a banana plant type leaf, and cotton are good materials as carrier materials. So this is Caitlin, and she is getting some jute, coffee bags ready for us. Okay, here we all are at the University of Pacific working with the valley beater. And you can see closest to the bottom of the screen, a big mass of pulp that's already been made from military uniforms, which we will then make into paper. A few more shots of just prepping the machine, filling it with water, draining the water out, and making the pulp. We're using a paint strainer actually, and a 5-gallon bucket to remove some of the water from the pulp. Assembly member Susan Eggman you see there in the pink jacket. And one of her aides, Joel Reyna, also visited us because Susan Eggman has been a staunch supporter of The Right Place since it opened. And this was an opportunity for her to see our process and meet Drew, because Susan is a former military service person and she's quite enamored of our Veterans Project. Again, making more pulp. All this pulp is been through the beater and it's somewhat drained. Now we're back at The Right Place, and here Drew is showing me how to make a spur. In the past, what we did was take the paper from the stage you see on the right and put it on a flat rack to dry. And Drew instructed us to make 4 together. It's called a spur, and hang it up, and that way the paper dries flatter. So here we have a couple of participants. Nico and Andor are working on creating their pulp out of concert t-shirts and t-shirts that they've worn. And look at the difference in the pulp. What great color. So sometimes you can create color with pigment, but obviously colored fabric will create some beautiful paper as well. So here we are testing to see if it's ready. And again, here's another participant with different fabric, and look at the interesting combination that gray and purple makes when you finally get it beaten. We have quite a few people here now working on our project Pieces to Piece in our early stages. We worked with veterans first, and then we transitioned to the general community, because the Pieces to Piece project became more about trying to resolve trauma, not just military induced trauma, but trauma of any kind, from domestic violence to community violence, like being caught up in a violent demonstration or police action, or anything that causes the person to suffer mental, physical, and emotional harm. So what we're doing now is basically applying the idea as art therapy of making paper to explore what it means to take that garment. What are the associations with the garment? What did it mean to you? Where did you wear it? What happened while you were wearing it? Cut it up and make it into paper. Quite a lot goes through the mind as you go through this process, because it takes a few hours to actually do it. Now this little beater, this is our baby. This beater is an Oracle beater made by Lee McDonald in Boston, and it is portable. You'll remember that one at the University of Pacific Art Department was on a big steel cart. Certainly not portable. You can move it around, but this one, you just takes 2 people, you lift it up, you can put it in the back of a car and take it to school sites or community centers, etc. So here's what it looks like inside. It's got these great rotating blades, and there is at the bottom of that trough another set of blades, a plate. When the motor is lifted over and that drum meets the bottom plate, there is this action that goes on while the paper is pulled through by the water. And you can see the blades work like a water wheel, and they shoot the water around, and it continues to make like a trough of water. And it keeps, as the paper keeps getting, or as the rag gets beat more and more and more, the fibers start to separate, and then you can make it go closer and closer and closer and closer. It makes a lot of racket, but that's how the fiber in your material gets separated into strands, then that you can reform into paper. So now we're at hatch. And you can see it was really necessary to get out into the open to set this equipment up and space ourselves according to the 6-foot protocol. Everybody's wearing a mask, and we're all working on our paper. The beater is going nonstop pretty much for a week. And then this is a whole family, an uncle and his nieces and nephews. This is one of the kids pressing the water out of the paper now. And here's another participant. This is just goes to show you how interesting the paper can be. This came from actually a garment that we added some pigment to deepen the color. And then that red that's floating in it, those are rose petals. So when you're making paper, you can add all kinds of things. You can add tissue paper, you can add leaves, You can add straws. I don't mean drinking straws, but small, like plant-like material. Rose petals and lavender are particularly popular when you're making paper, especially if you're making stationery. This is a really interesting story because this participant brought a wedding dress. Now, as we're talking about making paper from a garment that is representative of a trauma, boy, a wedding dress is probably the last thing you would think of, unless it was a particularly failed marriage. And so this person took and cut the wedding dress up into these tiny squares and later added some rose petals to it and made the most glorious paper. And now that's a journal. I think there'll be pictures of this journal later. And I want to say about this participant, her sister had recently passed from cancer, and she brought a few articles of her clothing, a tank top, some socks, just a few mementos really, and made paper that she later turned into a journal that she took to the memorial, and all the family members got to write in it. This was worn by his late stepfather, I believe. And he told the story about how his stepfather would always load too much detergent into the washer when he washed the clothes, and it would often create a big overflowing of soap suds in the washroom. Well, if you look closely at the beater right there, you'll see how many soap suds are in the beater, because when you take a garment, it has a lot of residual soap in it. And people don't realize that. So sometimes when we get a garment that has a lot of residual soap in it and we beat it, we have to skim all of the soap suds off the top. That's what happened here. And he just said, oh, my stepfather or father-in-law, I can't quite remember, is still in this shirt. You can see the soap suds in this picture. All right, this is one of my favorite pictures from the whole summer because this shows a stack of the glorious, luscious paper that we created. You can see it from participant to participant to participant, all the different colors that the different garments made. Then we came to the right place. And again, socially distanced and masked, we created the journals. Everyone was given a piece of leather and they could tool on it, as this young lady's doing on the left. You see her stamping with the stamps that will mark a word into her journal. And then they were painted. And look at all this paper. All the paper that stacked up there was folded into signatures and then sewn with a 3-hole pamphlet stitch and then laced into the journal. So look at that, there's a finished one. Look at how much paper was made from the t-shirt that he brought. And again, all the different colors that people choose for their journals, it's such a personal thing. Here's an example of one where we cut off the deckled edge. Now, when you make paper, you can have a really roughly edge around it, or you can actually cut that off with a paper cutter if you so desire. So there we have 2 happy journal makers. And again, more journal making, and look at this luscious blue paper over here. Here we're rounding the corners before we get started. Painting. Assembling. This is a view of our auditorium at the right place. Just a wonderful workspace. Working on the journals. On the right, you see someone punching the 3 holes to do the 3-hole pamphlet stitch for the signatures. Oh, I love that purple paper. Look at how different all the journals turn out. It's just such a wonderful personal self-expression. And you can see from the journal, both of these journals left the deckled edge on. So the paper has this sort of frilly border around the edge. Now, all right, that's me. Caught me with my eyes closed. But my journal turned out to be pretty funny because I poured resin over some buttons and keys, and it came out looking pretty much like patent leather. It was great. I love working with resin as well. So we're back to Hatch. We're looking again at a couple more participants working the beater, making the journals. And I want to give a shout out to Vicky Gaia. She's an artist who came and made paper but did not make a journal. But I believe just did a lot more interesting things with her paper. She has worked with paper and made paper before. So these are just gorgeous and gives you an idea of what you can do with it. More journal making. We had a very busy summer, very, very busy summer. And we were quite excited to be part of this project with the community medical centers and really appreciated having Hatch as an alternative location. These are just fabulous. So you can tell from the pictures that all ages love doing this, young or old. Painting is painting. It's so much fun, and the journals are just such a personal expression of oh, I just don't even know what to say. I'm so happy with these. They just crack me up. Anyway, so that was Words Outspoken. We are continuing to do Pieces to Piece as a project. We will be doing 18 workshops over the next year. And if you are interested in this project, please let us know at tuleburgpress@gmail.com. tuleburgpress@gmail.com. Well, thank you for being with me today and looking at our project Pieces to Piece. And next week, or as the week continues, we will be showing you our letterpress studio. I'm in one of the rooms right now, and more about what we do here at The Right Place. All right, thank you for joining me.